All right, this is the Irish NFL Show's 2024-25 divisional preview show. Welcome back again to everyone who's watching us live on YouTube. If you're listening back to the podcast, you're now listening to the NFC divisional picks. You can check out the AFC preview on wherever you get your podcasts. And if you already listened to the AFC, then welcome to our NFC divisional picks. And we start with the NFC West. Noel, we go to you first in the division that sent the conference champion San Francisco 49ers on their way to a Super Bowl, which of course they lost in overtime at Allegiant Stadium in February. Do they repeat, or will there be a new challenger emerging from the NFC West?
No, for me, the 49ers is going to repeat. I think this team is stacked on both sides of the ball. They obviously have a head coach who can work wonders out there in the field as well, scheming things up. I just think the 49ers are so strong. You look at McCaffrey there. I know there's a lot going on with Brandon Ayuk. I think no matter whether he goes or stays, I still think this team is just too good. It'll be tough though. I think the Rams are on for a good season this year. I think Matthew Stafford could look really good. Obviously, Puka Nacua came out of nowhere last season and surprised everyone. They lose Aaron Donald, which can be a big loss, but obviously they go out and they get Jared Verse and Braden Fisk in the draft. So maybe those guys could come in and kind of plug a hole. We look to the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to be interesting. I'm not the biggest Geno Smith fan in the world. I think he can be a bit hit and miss. So for me, I'll kind of watch how he does. Obviously, they have a new head coach in there, so that's kind of maybe take a little time to see how everything develops. They had a Pete Carroll there for such a long time. It'll just be interesting to see how the team now moves on with a much younger head coach coming in. And then I think the final team will be the Cardinals, who actually I think could look pretty good this year. I know they won 4 games last season, but they have a very interesting looking offense, which could be really exciting to watch. I think they've made a few moves on defense because they had a terrible defense last year, which could maybe just shore it up a bit. But overall, I just think the San Francisco 49ers will be too strong. They've too much going into this division.
Kieran, a lot of people were surprised, and Noel touched on it briefly there, at the emergence or re-emergence of the Rams last year and how quickly they managed to rebuild. Obviously, they hit on some draft picks. Looks like they've addressed a couple of areas of need with Aaron Donald's departure, as Noel said, with the 2 FSU players coming in there, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. Massively fortunate, I suppose, but also credit to their scouting in Puka Nacua being probably the breakout draft pick from an offensive perspective last year as a fifth round receiver rather. Is that enough to put them over the top and challenge the 49ers? Do you see somebody emerging from elsewhere, or is it going to be San Francisco on top again?
No, I think I would love if the Rams pushed them all the way to the end, but it all comes down to horses in the end. I think San Francisco is just stacked top to bottom. They've just got too much in that division. It's at the stage now with Shanahan where it's almost like win or we're gonna have to try something else, because they've been that close the last probably 5 years, and even before that, with Harbaugh they got so close. But with Shanahan now, it's pretty much win or we may have to go a different direction, because you can't get that close every single year and not get to the finish line. Everything is lined up, even like Noel said with the
you can if you're Mike Shanahan or Andy Reid. Those are the 2 comparisons the poor old Kyle Shanahan keeps getting thrown at him, which means he has about 20 more years before he finally gets over the line.
He's got that hanging over his head. But even with the Ayuk's mini drama that's going on, that you look around the field. I mean, it's loaded everywhere. The one spot where you could say it's not loaded is quarterback, and that's the big decision that San Francisco is going to have. Not this season, but something going forward. I'm on record saying that I'm believing Purdy. I don't think he's not even an elite quarterback. I think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. He just lucked into a situation where he was surrounded by absolute beasts. But it's going to be a situation where the Niners are. I don't want to say going to stroll through the division, because I do know the Rams are going to keep pace with them up until December. But it's to all intents and purposes, it's looking like another 11-6, 12-5 season for San Francisco out west.
And as we head into the 2024-2025 season, the Brock for President fan club can go after Kieran now. He's now taken on the mantle from Colm of the the leader of the Brock is a Croc Brigade. All right, Shane, you're picking the West.
Yeah, I think it's the 49ers division to lose. I think they're going to have enough to do question with the 49ers is, can they get the number 1 overall seed, which would be maybe a little bit more difficult for them this year than it was previously, just because those 6 individual games against divisional opponents will be a little bit trickier than they were previously. I think the Rams and the Cardinals have all taken a step up, and I'm not quite sure what to expect from the Seahawks. So in terms of matchups and being able to build an overall record to challenge for the top seed, that's where the 49ers race is. They're not looking, I don't think they're looking too far or looking too much over their shoulder at what the Rams are doing. As good as the Rams are, as much as I highly rate their coaching, as much as I think they've got a very good squad, I don't think they're good enough to top this 49ers in this division, because it's quite simple. The 49ers Super Bowl window is not only open, it's being blown out of the wall. They have to do it now. So they have the team, they have the quarterback situation, which is sort of worked in their favor. I hope that Brandon Ayuk stays from their point of view, because I think he's a good enough player to help them get that over the line in one or two of those key matchups. So, for them, it's, everything's there. Just do it.
Yeah, I will say briefly for my part, I think this is one of the more intriguing divisions. Actually, it's gotten a little bit more interesting. Looking carefully to see what the Seahawks will be like under the new leadership there with Pete Carroll now gone. Will they get it right in the defensive side of the ball? Will we see the Geno of 2 years ago, or will that prove to have been a little bit of a mercurial flash? Cardinals, I'm interested in watching. Can't wait to see what Marvin Harrison Jr. does with Kyler Murray there. I think whatever way that one goes, that's going to be spicy. And I think with the Rams and the 49ers duking out at the top, it is going to be one of the more intriguing divisions. I do, however, see the 49ers coming out on top. Brian?
I spoke to John Chapman this week from the 49ers Rush podcast, and there's a very different mindset going into this season. Albeit, he said it was very familiar to last year. They go to the championship game, they have injuries, which derails an opportunity to win in Philadelphia. And essentially, they needed to run it back. And they did run it back, and they went one step forward. But he did note that the Trent Williams contract not being resolved and the Brandon Ayuk piece is, in particular in the Bay Area, is taking up such scrutiny on the media and on the airwaves that essentially no one's even talking about the fact that this team has such high expectations. They're all very disgruntled with Brandon Ayuk. He doesn't seem to know essentially what he wants. He doesn't want to go here. He doesn't want to go there. He doesn't want to take the money after suggesting he needs the money. If they can avoid all the distractions, this team should be certainly winning the division. And again, being very much in the focus come January to be going to the Super Bowl. But again, sometimes these type of situations kind of play silly buggers to teams and they don't find a way. I think Kieran, by the way, has given us our first kind of cannonball or fireball, pitbull moment of the season. We could use that potential song on a TikTok video around his suggesting that Brock Purdy isn't a top 10 quarterback. I think that's doing us a service to the guy. I think he's well capable of going and playing for any other team and being successful. But he's in a good position there, and I think they should be challenging for the Super Bowl, definitely winning the division.
All right, we move on to the NFC North, and Noel, last year Lions were probably the feel-good story, as we've talked about, of the NFL last year, going all the way to the playoffs, coming within a hair's breadth really of making it to the Super Bowl, never mind just getting to the playoffs. And they want to go one step better, but to do so, the cleanest path would be to take the North. Will they do it?
Yes, I think they will. I think they've built this team up so well over the last number of years. We obviously saw how close they got last season. A second half collapse is where they were, how close they were to a Super Bowl. I mean, you look at this offense, and it's so good at running back. They're sorted. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver. Sam Laporta is excellent tight end there. So on offense, they have all the pieces there. On defense, they had some issues at cornerback, which they went out and they addressed big time in free agency and in the actual draft itself. Then you have Jack Campbell, Aiden Hutchinson there. I just think this team has been built up really, really well over a number of years, and it's starting to come together. And I think they're probably going to be too strong. I think that their next kind of rivals will be the Packers. But I still have issues, or not issues, I have questions over the Packers. It's a very young offense. I don't think the quarterback is there. I think a lot of people are saying he's there. I think he's had half a season where he was really good and half a season where it kind of was coming together. So for me, it's still a question that has to be answered. Now, it ended really well for the Packers, and they have every right to be positive about it. But I just want to wait and see if that kind of growth continues. Again, the wide receivers look very good, but I want to see that growth continue. So that's kind of my questions with them. Then look, I have the Bears. I think the Bears definitely look like they're going in the right direction. But we've a rookie quarterback, and I'm just going to say that the rookie quarterback might be the reason I'll have them kind of drop back a bit, because as good as I think he can be, I think there's still going to be growing pains, which is just natural for any rookie quarterback coming into the league. And then, look, the Vikings got so unlucky with a couple of injuries, especially with their rookie quarterback. I think they probably are the number 4 team in the division, but I think it's a strong division. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Bears went ahead of the Packers or the Packers went ahead of the Lions. But I just think it'll play out that the Lions will be too strong. The Pack might be behind them, then the Bears and the Vikings.
Kieran, I will happily admit that this was the worst and most boring division in the NFL about 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's actually arguably one of the most interesting. But which way do you think it's going to pan out?
Well, at the risk of upsetting the Bears crew on the panel, I'm not sold on the Bears, and I'm not sold on Caleb Williams. I got a lot of question marks. A lot of questions about him coming up this season. There's going to be
he's not sold on any quarterback. There's
going to be some tabloid stuff with Caleb Williams, and there's going to be some sideline stuff that I'm guaranteeing is going to come out. But anyway, no, I think the Bears will be good, but it's too soon. It's again they loaded up in the draft. They lucked out getting the Dunze as well at 9, I think it was. The Packers I'm not sold on. Like Noel said, I think the Jordan Love fest has been overhyped. It's like Jets hype. It's ridiculous. I mean, he balled out and he had a good half of the season, but that was it's too small of a sample size. And like Noel said, I'm not sold on the offensive weapons they have. But I think there's still a lot of question marks about Romeo Dobbs, whatever his name is. And I think it's going to be a good season for them. It's going to be an improvement on last year, but I've got the Lions winning. I love Dan Campbell. I love Detroit. I love the grit. I love the shade of blue on the jersey. I just love everything about Detroit right now. The law firm of Gibbs and Montgomery are just going to run up and down the field. And I think it's between, even unheralded players like Alex Anzalone, the linebacker. Everyone talks about Hutchinson, but Anzalone is an absolute monster back there too. It was almost a heartbreaker. I don't think anyone has got a big raw or a love for the Lions, but it was almost heartbreaking when the Niners picked them off in the playoffs. Everybody was rooting for Detroit. I think somebody put out an Axel Foley kind of mood in Detroit, kind of meme at the time. But I think everyone's rooting for Detroit this year. I think they're gonna go a little bit farther. Without tipping my hat for the Super Bowl picks, I've got a really good feeling about Detroit this year. But they're gonna win the division and then some.
Yeah, I got to say, I'm with you there. I love the Honolulu Blue. I love what Brad Holmes and the crew did in the draft. They did what I thought was the sensible thing, what everybody thought they should do. This is kind of the Howie Roseman thing. People think Howie Roseman is a genius, but I think there's a sense that he just does the common sense thing at the right time, addresses the area that he needs to address. That's what the Lions did. The secondary was the one area where you thought they needed a bit of reinforcement. They've done precisely that. They've picked 2 guys that I think can, at least one of whom will slot straight in there. They got the receivers. Jared Goff, as Dan Campbell memorably said, is good enough for Detroit. He was damn near good enough to get them the whole way to the Super Bowl last year. I think they reload and they come back. They don't strike me as a team that is going to be anything like hungover or fall off after having gotten to the championship game and fallen short. Like you, I'm not going to spoil my Super Bowl pick here on, so I might just leave it there for the time being. But looking elsewhere in the division, There's an argument, if everybody does what they're supposed to do, that this division could actually send 3 teams to the playoffs. I don't think that's quite what's going to happen. I do think the Packers will just about get back there. Like you, Kieran, I'm slightly, having reflected last season, wondering, have we seen enough of a sample size of Jordan Love to really anoint him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? He looked like it when he looked like it, but he didn't when he didn't. I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say, well, he was able to slot in straight away because he had all those years sitting and learning behind Aaron Rodgers, and then watch what he did over the first few games and not think, still a little few question marks there. And that might be unfair, but that's only because it's a relatively small sample of games. We'll see how they go this year, but all the talent is there, to be fair. LaFleur is an excellent coach. We've talked about him at length on the show in the past, and that does make a big difference to them. I think that's the X factor for them. I think they'll go back to the playoffs as well, but I do think the Lions will take the division. Shane, your division winner.
Yeah, I'll be brief, and I probably won't spend too much time explaining my view. I think the Bears can do it. I think the Packers will do it, and I think the Packers will top the division. I think the Lions won't do it. I'll keep that short and sweet.
Brian, Shane broke the tie. Have you got something interesting to say?
I do, yeah. I'm with Shane on this. I think it's the year for the Packers to rebound. And I keep coming back to that game in January where we spoke even last Saturday night over a point, in fact, Connor, where you said The Lions aren't in that championship game if it wasn't for Dan Campbell rolling the dice. Yeah, but it's situational football, and they may not ever be back again with an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, and we have to live and learn that maybe the right thing to do is take field goals. I think they've lost their opportunity. I think
the Lions didn't get to the Super Bowl because a ball rebounded off a guy's freaking face mask. Like, let's not overweight on Dan Campbell being Dan Campbell.
Giants don't win a Super Bowl unless David Tyree catches a ball and hangs on to the back of someone's helmet. These things happen in playoff football. That's why we love it so much, Connor. Look, I think we saw enough out of Packers in the second half of last season to understand that they were gradually getting up to a new period with a new quarterback and transitioning, to acknowledging what he can do on the field. And like, let's bear in mind, it was his first year properly playing in the league, so of course it's going to take him time to get up to speed. But when he did, we saw the real merits as to why they've held on to him and why they kept him for the 3 or 4 years in the background to transition into the quarterback. And I think they're going to kick off the season really strong, and I think they're going to put them in a much better position. And I think they're bearing in mind that they beat the Lions last year. They beat the Lions on Thanksgiving Day in Detroit, and then they went into the playoffs. And if things had went their way, they could be playing in the championship game. I think they're primed for a big season, and I think they're ready to take the division again. I'm going to go with the Packers. Not necessarily saying the Lions won't have a successful season, but it's the Packers for me as well.
All right, you stay in the spotlight, Brian, because we come to you to kick off our preview of the NFC South. This one is a toss-up, or has been for the last couple of years. It's who gets to 7-10 first. Usually is the way that decides it. Will it be different this year? And if so, who's going to take it?
It will be this year. It will be this year because there was actually teams with winning records at the end of last season who didn't make the playoffs. I mean, everyone assumes it's the Bucs. The Bucs are going to run it back because the Bucs have been winning a difficult division over the course of the last few years. And we, even in March, April, people were suggesting they've won the off season because they maintained Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans. But there was parts of last season where the Bucs didn't look at the level in which they were towards the end of the season. The Falcons continue to have everybody scratching their heads. They've got all the players in the world to have a quality team, but they find ways to lose games, and then they find ways to win games when you don't expect it. And I think that's what we're going to see again from this team this year. I do think they're in a position to probably make a better push this year because of the nature of the quarterback. And I'm going to come back to my beloved old Saints, Connor, because I saw something interesting today. If you didn't know who the team was and you said worst offensive line in the league, didn't have a running back last year that went for 80 yards or more in a game, and didn't score on the opening drive for 16 of the 17 games, you would assume they'd only win 3 or 4 games, when in fact they won 9 games last year. I think Derek Carr is going to have a rebound season. I think the offensive line will get resolved. And I think they're a dark horse for the division, and I'm going to put my neck on the line again this year and go for the Saints to win the division.
Double down. He doubles down. Shane.
Last year, I thought the Saints would top the division this year at all. I mean, for me, when I look at this division, the Buccaneers have never played exceptional, but I've always found a way to top it. Last year, the tail end of the last season, they really built into it, so they are really the team to beat. But I think the Falcons are gonna win this division. I think there's enough, despite all the chaos that happened in the offseason, there's enough that's kind of coming in for them, right? I think. Firstly, I think Penix is maybe giving them or done the team a favor in that he's not played well enough to really start a quarterback controversy before Kirk Cousins gets onto the field. I was talking to the Orlando Ledbetter during the week. Podcast went out this morning. He's a Falcons beat writer from Atlanta. He basically just does explain that Penix isn't ready for the National Football League, so he's kind of done him a favor there. It's all on Kirk Cousins. We know that Kirk Cousins is a way, way, way better quarterback in talent than anything Atlanta had last year. Secondly, you look at what's around them. You think of the excellence in the running game that they can bring, the Drake London and the other wide receivers that they can throw to. I think they can really build a head of steam in a division where 10 wins will do it. Because there are 2 teams that 9 wins last year, the Bucs and the Saints. The Bucs topped the division. The Saints didn't make the playoffs. 10 wins is all you need to win this division. So I think the Saints have enough. And the biggest thing as well, they really need to improve in the pass rush. They got and their ability to make defensive tackles. They brought in Matthew Judon. What a great and maybe I'm slightly biased sitting here, but that's a great acquisition. That's exactly the kind of person that Atlanta needed. It might take Raheem Morris a couple of games, 3 or 4 weeks to really settle into the new system. A lot has changed. They bring a lot of staff from the Rams over to Atlanta to try and build up this team. But I really think there's enough behind him for them to go and win this division.
Maybe it's because I was listening to your interview with the Orlando Ledbetter as well, but I'm going Falcons as well. I think it makes sense. And I'm always slightly nervous about tipping a team when there's been that much change, but there needed to be change. One of the factoids I picked up from Aaron Schatz's FTN almanac this year was that the Falcons played 11 personnel more often than any other team in the league. Sorry, less often than any other team in the league last year. They had 3 or 4 wide receivers sets less than any other team in the league. And that's crazy for a team in the modern NFL. Goes to show how kind of reductive Arthur Smith's offense had become, and how he'd sort of second and third and fourth guessed themselves out of just giving his team the best chance possible to win. I think, like you, Shane, that Kirk Cousins can do the point guard thing with the talent he has available and get that thing humming. They've got one of the more consistent and one of the better and one of the more underrated offensive lines in the league. I think everything over that side of the ball is going to be fine. I think what could potentially hold them back, or what could have potentially held them back, was that they were losing a lot of production and having Bud Dupree and Calais Campbell out of the building, who were their chief pass rushing threat last year. My fears in that department were largely assuaged, though, or partially assuaged at least, by the Judon pickup that you mentioned. I think Justin Simmons is another excellent acquisition. I think they've done a lot of good work in the offseason. I think there are reasons why it made sense to draft Penix. I don't think I would have used that pick. I don't think that was necessarily the smart thing to do, and I think they'd be in better shape if they'd selected one of the better defensive players who was still on the board at that point. But overall, I think, to your point, Shane, you don't need to beat the best in the conference to get out of this division. You only need to beat what's around you. I don't think that you're necessarily going to see the same version of the Bucs that you saw last year. I actually would agree with you, Brian. I think the Saints might be marginally better, but I don't think it's quite going to be enough to top the Falcons, who I see as the class of this division. Noel, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with yourself and Shane. I think the Falcons will win this division. I think Kirk Cousins, as long as he comes back fit from this injury and he looks good when he actually takes the field in a regular season game, I think he could really help Drake London and Darnell Mooney. And Kyle Pitts has never really hit the heights. This is maybe a quarterback who could kind of help bring that out of him. They've obviously a very good running game there with Robinson. The defense did worry me, and that was kind of a question mark to me. But the Judon move obviously allays a big chunk of that fear. But again, it goes back to the division. They're not going to need to win as many games as most other divisions to take it. And I think they'll just be good enough on offense to win enough games to get over the line. So, yes, it's the Falcons for me.
And Kieran, before we go to you in the East, who's your pick for the South?
This is a brutal division. This is a really, really bad division. There's not a lot I can see. I've heard all the stuff about the Saints. I don't believe in the Saints, period. I think they're a bad team. I think Derek Carr is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I think the first drop back in the first game of the season is going to be an incompletion, and the fans are going to give him the business. Dennis Allen will be the first head coach fired. Derek Carr is going to be benched probably by game 4 or game 5 and be run out of town. Saints do not like Derek Carr. The fans do not like him. Panthers are miles away from doing anything productive, even with some of the changes they've made. And the Falcons are the Jets of the NFC. They're just I don't know what the Kirk Cousin love in. Terry Fontenot, he's going to get fired too for drafting another quarterback.
The Falcons are the Jets of the NFC. Can I introduce you to the Carolina Panthers?
Well, the Falcons get a lot of press, and they always seem to get the media on their side, and then end up with an 8-9 season or a 7-10 season. I don't believe in the Falcons. I think it's going to be another season of the same old stuff for the Falcons. I know they've upgraded on the quarterback position, and they've got some so-so players on offense, Drake London and Kyle Pitts, who haven't really hit the heights yet. I'm going with the Buccaneers purely because it's the best of a bad bunch. I think it's going to be a 9-8 win, and that's going to get them over the line. I just think there's just poor teams there. And, thank God for the NFL Sunday Ticket or even the Red Zone, because otherwise I'd be stuck watching the Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons down here in the South, because that's a poor thing to look forward to on a Sunday. So thank God for Mr. Hansen with the network. I'm going with the Buccaneers. Baker's got just enough. They've got just enough weapons with Godwin and Rachaad White running the ball. But oh man, that's gonna be tough sledding. Tough sled.
All right, don't go anywhere, Kieran, because you're starting us off on the NFC East, where we'll finally see, are there any quarterbacks you actually like? Surely you've got a bit of Dak Prescott love.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Dak, being surplus to requirements in Dallas come next season when they have to pay him upwards of $60 million. I'm not a huge proponent of Dak. I think he's good enough for what's given to him. Jerry gives him just enough weapons. But the thing with the Cowboys this year is, that's a bad running back room. Rico Dowdle and Zeke Elliott, that's your answer. And then there's a huge drop off in creativity and in talent after CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks. I'm not sold on it being a big year in Dallas, which is strange to say because usually they're a perennial, favorites. But the Giants, we've talked in length about them, and it could go either way. It could be a 3-14 or it could be a 10-7. It all depends if Daniel Jones stays healthy. Washington, that's another work in progress. I'm on record saying Jaden Daniels is not ready for the league just yet, even with the talent that's around him. He's undersized. He's going to have to bulk up a huge amount in the next year or two. But with the Eagles, I can't see anybody else than the Eagles. They've upgraded on the one spot they needed to, which was running back last year, despite the question marks about Saquon's health. And the one thing to look out for with Jalen Hurts, that's the other question mark. The teams have figured out that if you run zero blitz, he just gets spooked and he doesn't know what to do. But I think Barkley's going to be a huge safety blanket for him because once he started throwing last year, that's when all the problems happened. Giving it off to Barkley 20, 30 times a game is going to be a big help for him. I think, and again, it all comes down. It's like the 49ers. It's just talent everywhere. It's, Devonta Smith. We don't need to reel off the names. We all know where the talent is. And the two spots, again, like we discussed, that they got smoked on in the regular season in December and even in the playoffs, they addressed in the draft with the two draft picks. Who was I forget the name, Quinyon Mitchell,
Cooper DeJean,
just DeJean Cooper, and they've upgraded in all the positions. The only question mark is Sirianni. There's a lot of talk about Sirianni and Hurts relationship, and is it deteriorating? Is that going to be enough of a factor to derail the season? But again, it comes down to talent, and they're just loaded everywhere. And with Saquon back there, if he stays reasonably healthy, if he gives them 70% of a season, then that's going to be enough to get it past the line. So I'm going to Eagles.
Brian, as Kieran was saying, it could go either way for the Giants. It was intriguing, though, to see them unretire Ray Flaherty's jersey for Malik Neighbours. That just goes to show you the sort of value that they place in him. If he is the player that the Giants believe he can be, and if he's worth that honour, that could be very intriguing. Is that enough to take the division?
No, absolutely not. I don't think the Giants will be in the sweepstakes for this division. I like the way you tee that up, Conor, but I think the harsh reality for Giants fans is I think we're going to be in the I think we might be in the Dak Prescott sweepstakes next year because we might find ourselves doing just enough to win so many games that we just aren't in the pecking order for the quarterback come April 2025 when we roll around from another draft. But let's not get too carried away with that. We've got a season ahead of us. I think there is a good opportunity for the Giants this year. People are underestimating it, but ultimately I think it's going to come down to the very first 2 weeks of the season. And it's strange I might say that, but Sam Darnold week 1 and Jaden Daniels week 2. I mean, realistically, you look at quarterbacks you're playing in the league and you need to get over the line against these type of quarterbacks with all due respect to them. If the Giants find themselves 0-2, the pressure is already on Joe Shane. Joe Shane was very snappy at the press conference yesterday. It wasn't a contractually obliged press conference, so I was surprised he even went to the trouble of doing it, but he was snapping at a lot of reporters. To me, it looks like he's already kind of feeling the pressure and expectations of what John Mara said recently, which is he expects a better season. He should expect a better season. In terms of the division itself, I'm going to stick with the Cowboys. I think whilst they didn't do a lot in the offseason, I don't think necessarily they have to. I think I kind of would disagree with Kieran Sly. I think they've got enough offensively to really put up an average of 30 points per game. Like, yeah, the running back room is a concern, and they brought in Dalvin Cook this week, which this time last year everybody felt the Jets had pulled off a massive stroke and bring him in, but it looked like he was on the wrong side of his career after his departure from the Vikings. But I think offensively still got enough. I think defensively they got playmakers. It is a concern that they've lost Land, the cornerback, for 6 weeks, but the Cowboys last year took hold of so many games defensively, and I see that the same this year. For me, the Sirianni conversation hasn't gone away. How has it gone away? Like, they lose a playoff game. It looks like it's a disgruntled camp. Nobody wants to play for him. What's turned around in 6 months that all of a sudden everything is at an equal footing again? Like, they haven't played a game. They hadn't had the players really back together since July. It'll be interesting to see if they don't get off to a fast start. You know what the Philadelphia Eagles fans are like. There'll be an adverse reaction. And does the pressure mount on him? And does it I'm not entirely convinced the GM is also in lockstep with the head coach. So that's one to watch, and I think that could potentially could be what derails the Eagles' season, the pressure on the head coach if they don't get off to a fast start. And Vic Fangio is a head coach in waiting in terms of an interim head coach, not necessarily a long-term head coach, but they have somebody, including Kellen Moore, that could potentially step in if he was to lose his job. But I'm sure Eagles fans will think I'm barking up the wrong tree, but I think there's an undercurrent there that hasn't been resolved, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that the Sirianni storyline is going to be fascinating to watch, but I have to say there was no Sirianni storyline when they were sleepwalking their way to 10 wins last year. They were absolutely running through teams like a knife through butter for the first part of the schedule. Agreed, it was disturbing to watch how they just precipitously fell off a cliff. And when we saw some teams collapse later on in the season, we talked about the Jaguars early and how they combusted. But the Eagles was just a spectacular blow for such a talented team. But I still can't get away from the fact that they are such a talented team. They got, as Kieran said, the best players in every position that really matters. Yeah, there are question marks to a certain extent over whether people have figured out Jalen Hurts, but I think he's got so many players to get the ball to, and Saquon probably for me is the missing piece to give him the sort of insurance that he's going to need to keep him where he needs to be to get the Eagles rolling. I think defensively they're going to be much better off than they were last year. They addressed what they needed to. They got the two guys in the draft who they should have been looking to get to plug the gaps in their secondary. And I just look around them and I think Giants probably not going to have enough. I'm interested to watch them this year and see what happens with Jones back and hopefully fully fit. I'm very excited to watch Malik Neighbors and very excited to watch that Giants defense, which just got even better. And Brian Burns is a superb acquisition there. I think they're going to be terrifying as they were last season, but even more so this year. Probably the most underrated defensive unit in the NFL, in my opinion, last year. Defense really at times can only be as good as the offense lets you, with given your field position and the circumstance you're going to be put in. I think the Giants are going to be in a better position this year, and who knows, they may. I won't spoil my wildcard picks, but they may win enough games to be in the conversation. I don't think they're going to win enough games to win the division. I just think the Cowboys, it's, plan B is plan A harder. They just keep doing the same thing every year. Don't make any major acquisitions. Don't address the areas that you really should be addressing, and just hope that things are going to be 5 or 10% better out of nowhere. That's just not a formula for me. They've consistently squeezed out the double-digit wins, in fairness to them, kind of like the Bills on the other side of the draw, and then consistently failed to build on that. I don't see them having done enough. I think you're going to find that the Cowboys hit that point where you're at your peak, and then a year later, you're a year past your peak. And I think that's where they are now. They haven't done enough, and I don't think they're going to win the division. I think it's Phillies all day long for me. Shane, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. I'm not quite sure what to make of the Giants. I don't think they have enough in them to win the division. Can they make the playoffs? We really have to see how well Daniel Jones plays. We haven't really seen him on the field. We're not quite sure what to expect. I think with the Cowboys, it's a simple case of they've done so much dicking around in the front office that they actually cannot get their front foot. They cannot get on their front foot on the field. And this whole cycle, it's always thing, the cycle of we them boys, oh no, wait, something's gone wrong, or something's going to go right again, something goes wrong again. It's just going to keep turning and turning and turning. So I think, they will have a lot of games where they will turn heads. They will have a lot of games that will build excitement, but they will have a lot of games when they are crushingly disappointing. With the Eagles, though, I think the Eagles are going to win the division for the simple fact that they're not going to rely on the tush push or the brotherly shove as much this year. And they're going to force themselves to have to play football. And they're going to remind themselves that they're actually pretty good at it. So for that reason, the fact that they are by far the most talented squad in the division, I think the Eagles are going to top the East.
Noel, before we reveal all our wildcard picks, who do you think is going to take the East?
Yeah, just watch Shane there. For me, the Eagles are just the most talented team in this division. And I think they made a great move bringing Barkley in. Brian touched on the defensive coordinators earlier, or the coordinators earlier on. Now, whether they'll become a story, if there's any issue with Sirianni, could they become a distraction? I don't think they will. I think they've upgraded at defensive and offensive coordinator spots. I think they have enough good players in there that they can take this division. I don't really see them having too much trouble. The Cowboys, I think, may start to regress a bit. As you say, they've just become a bit stagnated. I don't really know what they're doing going forward. And then I still think the Commanders and the Giants, for me, still need a bit of time to get these rosters built up before they can challenge, certainly for this season anyway. So yeah, for me, I just see the Eagles take it.
Good stuff, Brian. I know you're impressively double jobbing here. For anybody watching YouTube live, Brian also doubles as the graphics producer and has to flash up the banners on the screen. We're getting to our wildcard picks now, so why don't we start with yours? If you can throw them up there for anyone watching live. Obviously, not something you're going to be enjoying if you're listening back to us on podcast, but I can tell you the visuals are only spectacular here. Brian, you have the Lions, Eagles, and Falcons in the wildcard spots in the NFC.
Yeah, I touched on it earlier. I think the Eagles can flatter to deceive, the Falcons can flatter to deceive, but I still think there's enough there this season that they can, with Kirk Cousins there, they can have a bit more of a stabilized season and do enough to make the playoffs. The Eagles, like again, I said I'm quite high in the Cowboys. I don't like I think we're all been doing a disservice to the Cowboys in terms of, like, but let's bear in mind they went to the divisional round last year and there were heavy favourites going into that game and they got exposed greatly. But over the course of the season, they didn't get exposed in too many games. And I think they're worthy of winning the division again. But I do have the Eagles making the playoffs, despite my concerns around Sirianni. And as a touchdown, I think the Packers are primed for a bounce back year in terms of retaining the NFC North division again. So they're my three, and obviously we touched on it earlier: Ravens, Dolphins, and my surprise factor being Will Levis and the Titans to make the playoffs, which is on the graphic as we speak.
All right, Kieran, we get to your wildcard picks, and we saw your AFC ones earlier on, but just to complete the picture, you have the Cowboys, you have the Rams, and you have the Packers in the wildcard slots in the NFC.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the Cowboys, they're going to have enough in the division just purely on what they have, and probably the Giants and definitely Washington not having enough. I like the Rams. I think the two pickups they had, Verse and Fisk, was going to be a big help with that kind of Aaron Donald replacement. And we know about Puka and all the skill and what they bring on the offense. And with Green Bay, it's too soon yet. I haven't seen enough, but I think the talent is there, despite the fact that the Bears are kind of barking at their heels. I think they're going to have enough to pick that wild card spot up in that. Not just in the division, in the conference. And then, like I said earlier, I got the Bills and the Jags and Baltimore taking the 6th spot.
Shane is the next man up. Shane, we've seen your AFC picks again a little bit earlier, but to recap there, you had the Ravens, Bills, and Texans in the wildcard spots in the AFC. For the NFC, you've gone for the Cowboys, the Rams, and the Bears.
Yeah, with the Cowboys and the Rams, I think they will both have periods of the year where they will have 4 or 5 wins in a row, or 4 or 5 wins in the 6 or 7 week period. That will be enough for them to get to the playoffs in the NFC side of things. I know I was talking down with the Cowboys earlier, but I think they have enough to make the wild card spaces easily enough, just based on the talent they have. I just want to talk about the Bears and the fact that the Lions aren't in my playoff picks at all. I think a very key game this year will be Bears versus Lions. I don't know what week it is, but it's the weekend before Christmas, the 22nd of December, when the Lions have to go to Soldier Field and play against a Bears team who I'm convinced will be deeply in the hunt for a wild card spot, or even at that point, top in the division. Although I think the Packers will end up top in the division. It is in those games that I believe that part of Dan Campbell's philosophy, which is his point of difference, which is the reason why they got so far last year, becomes a weakness against teams which have a sense of belief and have just a greater sense of situational football. And I think the Bears will get over them in that 1-1, and that could be a very, very key difference in making the wild card and not making the wild card, because I think the Lions are in danger of losing too many games in the first 4 or 5 weeks just because of the hangover of how last year ended. In the same way that Florida State came into this year's college game with a hangover that saw them being usurped by Georgia Tech. Now, no, it's a different situation, but I think there are some that can be applied to the Lions here. And I think the Bears, as I've stated earlier on this program, have enough momentum and enough talent to really make a playoff push.
All right, Noel's picks are next. Noel has the Cowboys, Rams, and Packers. Noel in the NFC making the wildcards.
Yeah, in terms of the Cowboys, I obviously talk about them. I mentioned earlier, I think they'll regress a bit. Well, they've won 12 games the last 3 seasons, so I think they can regress to 9 or 10 and still make that wildcard spot. I do really like the Rams. I like what they've got on offense, especially. But obviously, we mentioned that they have filled gaps on the defense with 2 really good defenders coming in, and then the Packers. again, I talk about, a young team. For me, love hasn't been the question of love hasn't been answered yet, and those young kind of wide receivers and attacking players. But I do think if they trend the way they were last season and they do keep going the way they're going, then I think they are very talented and they will challenge for the division. And if they don't make it, then I do think they will be good enough then to hit that wild card spot.
All right, as we reveal my wildcard picks, you'll see that interestingly, despite the fact that we have two Bears fans on the show, the only person who actually picked the Bears to make the wildcard was Shane. So I have the Cowboys. I said I don't think they're going to quite have enough to top the Eagles in the East, but I do think they're still going to make the playoffs. I still think they're a decline in force, and I think it's the same old. Unfortunately, Cowboys fans, I think you're one and done in the playoffs when you do get there. The Rams, I think, are a very intriguing prospect, as we were saying a little bit earlier. It's too much of an ask for them to get by the 49ers in the West, but they're a dangerous one in the playoffs. Not one I'd particularly want to face, I have to say, if it was me. And I still think while they showed very strongly towards the back end of the stretch last year and made the playoffs, as I predicted they would this time last year, to tap my to beat my chest on that one, I do think the Packers will make the playoffs again. I do think it'll be as a wild card. Again, based on what they did to the Cowboys last year, not a team you would particularly want to face, and will very much have that mantle of a team you'd rather avoid as a potential banana skin in the playoffs. We are, as you'll have seen, for those of you watching us live, we're back very much in regular season mode, and we're back again live next Monday. That's the 2nd of September, where we'll be looking through some of the individual player awards or making predictions on who we think are going to be the MVP of the season, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. We'll also give our Super Bowl picks on Monday, and little bit of a sneak peek or teaser. We will have a nice competition to go along with that. So please do make sure and tune in on YouTube Live, on Facebook, or indeed on X or Insta, where you can see the Irish NFL show live. If you don't get a chance to look at us live, you can pick us up on your favorite podcast platform. And do please remember to like and subscribe. Thanks again to everybody who's tuned into us live this evening, and also to you, all of you listening back to us on the podcast of the show. And welcome to all our new listeners. And we met many of you while we were out at the college game over the weekend. It was brilliant to see just how the community is growing, and to get a chance to watch some live football action together. There'll be plenty more to come as the regular season progresses. We got 17 weeks of it. We got the playoffs, and we cannot wait.